Okay, quick thing that I'm loving lately because I'm so bad at drinking plain water. So I started using the key on aminos. And first of all, the watermelon flavor is so light and refreshing, which is so rare, and I love it. So now I'm drinking way more water and it doesn't even feel like I have to try. So win-win there. Beyond that, there's so many health benefits like lean muscle support, recovery, and clean energy. Up your morning routine, go to getkion.com, that's Kion, and use code SarahPress at checkout and you'll get 10% off. I'll also link this in the show notes in case you forget. Today's episode is for those of you who know that you could benefit from sharing your story and your business on podcasts. Today's guest is Michelle Glogovac, who is the CEO and the founder of the MLG Collective. And she talks all about how to find, structure, and pitch to the right podcasts and why there's a huge benefit to doing so. So enjoy the episode and share it with a friend who you think could benefit as well. Okay, Michelle Glogovac, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation that's around storytelling and connection, especially in this day and age where we are all about AI and we're seeing that everywhere. I think this is going to make for a really interesting conversation. But before we jump into all of that, I would love for you just to share with my listeners a little bit about what it is that you do in helping businesses get their story across.
I coined my own term, the podcast matchmaker, where I match podcast hosts with guests that have similar listeners and similar goals in mind. And it's really when you're a guest, you have an opportunity to share your knowledge, your expertise, your story. And that's so important for a business because it allows people that opportunity to fall in love with you as the business owner, as the person who is leading the ship, per se, and to really get to know you in your own words versus, an ad on TV or the radio or wherever it is. We actually get to connect with you on a personal level. And one of the words that I hate, my least favorite word is authentic, because if you say it, then you aren't it. Um, but it allows you to really just show up as yourself, as you are, and for people to get to know you and say, you know what, I loved hearing what you had to say on this podcast. I want to work with you. I want to learn more about you. I want to read your book or buy your product, your service, whatever it is. And so my job is to work with clients to figure out what that story is. Why do you do what you do? Why do you want to get up every morning and do this work? What is it about you that if you have a book, you've put into your book? Why should people work with you versus others? Because we're all the same, right? There's a bunch of different companies that are the same. I'm not the only podcast PR agency out there. So what is it that makes me different? And part of that is my story and why I do what I do.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And in this day and age that we're in, I feel like connection is so important. And like you said, there are so many people doing this. So it is important for them to feel like they have a feel for who you are as a person. So do you find that people that are not necessarily comfortable speaking on camera or talking, what does that process look like for them to step out of their comfort zone?
I remind them that it's really just a conversation with one other person. Forget about the thousands or millions, however many you will actually reach. Just show up like you're having a cup of coffee with somebody, and that this is an opportunity for you to get to know each other and for you to share yourself. And if you look at it as a one-on-one, it's much more comfortable than if you are on a stage and speaking to 200 people or 1,000 people. You're just there with this one person. And that's the beauty of podcasts, is that we all get to eavesdrop in on that conversation that we want to hear, yet we're
Mhm.
not privy to it. With a podcast, we are privy to that conversation. And so even if people are reserved and, don't want to speak to crowds, it's just a conversation with one person. And don't think about it being recorded. I mean, I've got lights and everything right in front of me, yet I'm, simply looking into your eyes, into the camera. And that's really
Mhm.
what I say to my clients is just relax. It's one conversation with one human being, and that's all that you're doing. And if you treat it that way and you're relaxed about it, then it's going to come through to all of the listeners.
That's so true because sometimes even recording these podcasts, you start getting in these conversations and you forget that they're actually being recorded. You kind of feel like you're more on a FaceTime when they're remote.
Yes, yes.
And yeah, that could be so different than asking somebody okay, how about you go speak at this event where you're going to be on stage? live. And, at least with the podcast, if you completely fumble, you could be like, hey, I'm going to start that part over. I completely misspoke about what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and you can get comfortable too. Half the time people don't know that I have a heated blanket over my lap because I'm freezing and it's comfortable. I've got my cup of coffee with me. That's not something that you could do on stage to be, warm and cozy and comfortable, but on a podcast you can, look
Hmm.
decent from the waist up. Nobody's
Right.
going to know. Nobody's going to know what's in your lap. It's fine.
I've seen so many. There's that guy from Shark Tank. I think it's Kevin O'Leary. He
Mhm.
always shows like the behind the scenes and he's in like ridiculous shorts and then like a business suit on top and he's on like CNBC and like all these places and you're like, "Oh my God, I just find that to be so funny." I love that he like shares the imperfect behind it.
Yes.
So where do you see like when you're working with whether they're like small business owners or authors or whatever they are, where do you find that most people like make the mistake or what is something that you typically see that people miss when they're sharing their story?
They don't know where to start or what it is that's really going to grab someone's attention. And oftentimes I find that when you just tell me your story, then I can point out to you, oh, that's a good one. Like I want to learn more about that because I treat it as I am a listener. I'm going to be somebody who wants to hear your story. And so I will definitely coach the clients as to, give me more of this. Tell me about this. I had one client who she owns her own agency. It's a marketing agency, and everything she does is change. She's got a change framework, the change method, like everything was change, change, change. Well, it turned out that her 10 years in corporate, she wasn't allowed to use the word change in any of the copy she wrote.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
But when I was interviewing her, she didn't mention it. And luckily I knew that. So I pulled it out of her and I'm like, you need to put the word change on a post-it and stick it on your monitor to remember to mention that part of your story because it's literally why you're doing what you're doing, whether you realize it or not. You're using this word because for so many years you couldn't use the word, and that's all you say now. And it's really
Right.
interesting that
And how relatable.
yes. Yes. So it's in, sharing your story with somebody else. And even if you're doing it with just a friend, I would say do it because that way they can give you that feedback of, oh, that was really interesting. I didn't know that. I'd like to learn more about that. Or that makes you more relatable when you share that part. So
Hmm.
just share your story just with one person. And then you'll figure out that, oh, that's what I should be talking more about. Because oftentimes we also think, A, I'm not interesting. Like, who's going to want to hear
No
this?
one
It's
cares.
boring. Yeah.
Right.
Or then it becomes, I've told my story 1,500 times. And I've done interviews where I've asked someone, share with me how you started this. And the person, I've actually been told this by a guest, well, I've said this like 100 times. Like, yes, but it doesn't mean that my listeners know this story. That's why I'm
Right.
asking. So you have to get comfortable with repeating yourself too, because it's going
Hmm.
to be a new audience no matter what. And I think that people also get uncomfortable going, oh, I've already shared this, but people haven't already heard it.
It's almost like that spotlight effect that you're like, oh my gosh, I've said the same thing over. Like, no one's going to keep listening to my podcast if I have the exact same messaging on all of them. But it goes back to the like, I've even listened to podcasts and I'm like, oh, that was a great episode. A week later, trust me, I'm not remembering exactly what was said on that podcast. So,
Yes,
and don't they say people need to hear it? What is it, like 7 times
seven
or
times.
probably a million times to
Hmm.
like really understand it? So, like, I've even noticed like the most successful people say the same thing over and over and over again. And they maybe just tweak the way they say it or their environment that they're saying it in or the story. But at the end of the day, like the root of the story is the exact same across every single like media that they do.
Yes, and it builds trust too. If somebody hears you say your story 15 different ways, 15 different times, then which story is actually the truth?
Right. You're like, what
Uh,
actually happens?
yeah, yeah. So it's good to be consistent and to keep repeating yourself because that's the truth. That's what people are going to rely on when they're listening to you.
Hmm. So what is that process with like if you're working with say a small business owner that's never been on podcast before, what does that process look like that you take them through in order to get them like comfortable and excited about whatever their story is that they're sharing?
First, I have a Google onboarding form that they have to fill out. And so they know right away what exactly I'm looking for. I'm like, share with me kind of your thoughts. Tell me what you think you can speak on. And then I go and I stalk them. I do a Google deep dive. I'm like, let me find out where you've been. I've had people go, I didn't do that podcast. I'm like, really? Here it is. 5 years ago, I found it. The internet keeps everything. So here it
Mm-hmm.
is. And I will go and look up, I will look at your website. I've also had clients, there was one who I presented a topic and she goes, where did you get that from? I'm like, it's the header on your website.
No way.
So, yes, sometimes it's good to revisit these things because we forget what we even have put out there on ourselves. But that's
Mm-hmm.
part of the process. And then we have an hour-long one-on-one that it can be like a therapy session. I have had clients cry because I want you to tell me everything. It doesn't mean that everything you tell me is what we're going to pitch or present to the world, but I need to know everything. I need to understand why you do what you do. And we also go over like, do you want to share that? No. Okay. Then we'll skip that, but it's good for me to know because then it also informs me of what shows we should approach and which ones we should avoid. And, how personal are you willing to get? So I ask all of these questions just as if we were doing a podcast interview so that I can learn more. And I take notes and I'm constantly writing. It ends up being like 10 pages of notes going back and
Wow.
forth. And then I sit with it for a while and then create topics. And while we're talking, I start marking on my pages of notes of like, oh, that would be a good topic. I like that one. And it's
Mm-hmm.
in taking these long notes and then making them into a nice non-generic speaking topic. So
Okay.
then I present all of those with a branded media kit to the client. And that's where we have a little back and forth of, do we need to tweak this, change that, add this? And then we go there. We start pitching.
Yeah, I think you like nailed on something. It's like people could have, there's so many different pillars you could talk about, but it is important to know like what is really the purpose of whether it's going to be to promote your business or what your offering is. And like you don't have to share everything. This is not like tell me your whole entire life story, but it's more of like, okay, what makes sense for what it is you're doing so people can understand your why behind it. And this kind of leads into the next thing, which is like, I was reading an article this morning that was talking about how like 47% of podcasts right now are unclear whether they're AI or not. And that is a
Uh,
huge number because these AI bots can be like pumping out content
mm-hmm.
very, very quickly. And so in reading through like what you do, I think what's an interesting piece is like those AI, they're not going to have the human connection.
There's a whole AI network of podcasts. I was
I
reading
mean,
about this.
that like
It's a
blows my
network,
mind.
yeah, and it's AI generated cover art and it's AI generated content, and so they can whip out these episodes really easily because it's all AI generated, with different voices and whatnot. And that's it really sucks for people like you and I who are putting in this work and this effort and this time and money.
Actual brain power,
Yes, to
you know?
create something. And I think that, whether people realize or not that it's AI, you have to figure that one out. Like consume consciously. When it's conversations, I remember, oh, it's been over a year. There was, I don't know if it was Google or something, but you could put in a topic and it would create a podcast episode for you explaining the topic between two people. And I remember my husband was like, have you heard this? Like they'll explain stardust to you. And it
Wow.
sounds real, which is disturbing. Um, I
Yes.
I'm not a fan of this. I think that AI is great for content you have created to help you organize or streamline. Like we use Riverside, I use Riverside as well. I love the AI components of show notes because
Yes.
we've already done it. The content is already there. We're not asking it to create something new. That's where I
Hmm.
think AI is great. It's beneficial. It's a shortcut. But to create content from scratch, uh-uh.
And it's like, what are we feeding? Like that can go down a very slippery slope of like, what are we feeding our brains? Who are we listening to? Who's training these robots?
Yes.
That, I mean, that goes down like a completely different avenue right there. And
Yes.
so, I do think that there is something to that human connection piece with having people share their story and connecting on a human level that I mean, maybe at some point you will, but I don't feel like, at least I'm not getting that through any of the AI creators right now, we'll call them. So, okay,
Hmm.
this is the other place I want to jump into. This kind of leads into it. There's content that look like people are on podcasts and they're not. They're just creating these clips so that it gives like that extra credibility piece on the other
Yes.
social platforms.
Yeah, the
I'm
reels.
Yeah, so I'm curious your take because I'm a big believer, I was just saying before this, on Friday I'm speaking on the power of a podcast. And we have an optometry business. So I had the doctors do a podcast on their specialty care because now I don't have to bother them for content and we could repurpose those in so many different ways. So I'm
Yes.
a huge believer in like the power of doing, important episodes. But I'm curious your take on the power behind those and all the different modalities that you share with your business owners on ways that they can repurpose it and use it.
I'm a big believer in repurposing, and I would imagine that people are creating the clips versus doing a full podcast episode because they're like, here's a sound bite that would be really good and, clickable and really bait. But then what exactly are they going to click to? Because there's nothing further behind it. Whereas if we're giving them a podcast clip, and they're going, "Oh, this is great content," they can go listen to the full 30 minutes. So to do, clickbait, what's behind it? What are they going to get out of it besides up to 3 minutes of a good talking point? I really disagree with that. But, at the same time, I see a lot of creators doing long form interviews and having nowhere to put them, which also confuses me because if you're already putting in all of this work to interview someone for 20 or 30 minutes just to clip it down, then why not use it as a podcast and then
Hmm.
repurpose it into more marketing content? To me, it's a no-brainer that you would be able to do this because you're already spending the time. And a podcast is not as hard to create, especially these days, as it was,
Right.
10 years ago. It was
The
a
barrier
lot
to
more work.
entry
It's
is
low.
much lower. Right.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
the good news is everyone can have a podcast. The bad news is everyone can
Everyone can
have a
have a podcast.
podcast.
Exactly. I say it all the time. It's a
Yes.
blessing and a curse.
It truly is. Yes. And I also think that, for business owners, I'm going to be working with some business owners creating mini series podcasts where you don't have to have it every single week coming out for your podcast if that's not the foundation of your business. If it's
Yeah.
meant to feed your business, you can come out with episodes when you feel comfortable doing so. And now you have content to put in like email marketing and social media. You can send it to potential clients. And there's just so many other ways to use podcasts than just strictly having a weekly podcast.
Yes. Yes. And you should be repurposing it. The fact that we can do clips and show notes and turn it into a blog post and put it all over social media on all of the different platforms, there's no
Mhm.
reason not to. Like, you're creating this, you're spending time, you should be repurposing it. And not only as the host, but as the guest, because it's the way to say thank you to the host who's just put in all of this time and effort in interviewing you and having you on their
Mhm.
show and editing it and doing all of the things. Then you should be repurposing that interview too.
I did have somebody on the podcast who's in marketing and she's in New York. Shout out to her. And she was like, "Can I have all the raw footage of the podcast we did?" And I was like, "Sure." She created the most amazing thing on LinkedIn and somewhere else. And I was like, that was so nice to have, I do it on my end and then to have somebody else do it in their tone on their end. I was just blown away by it. And a lot of people don't think to do that afterwards. They're just waiting for you to come out with what you want because they think like, maybe like I own it. I'm like, no, here it is. Do what you'd like with it. And if you don't want me in it necessarily, no problem. But like just tag that the podcast that it was on when you spoke about that.
Yes. And if you're a host, give assets, please. I had one come out, an interview of myself last week, and they sent me an email and they're like, here's the link. And I went, "Oh, but is there anything that
Is there
goes with the
more?
link? Like, how should
Right.
I promote it without a graphic, without any clips? Like, there's nothing here." So, yes, we have to then do some more work on our end to, promote that. But because I hear it from hosts too, oh, they're not promoting the episode, they're not sharing. Did you give them anything to share? Uh,
Hmm.
like that's an easy one. If you give them something to share, then it makes it much easier to do that lift. I think what your guest did is amazing.
I
Um,
mean, given she's in marketing, so
right,
she
right.
knows what she's doing, that's for sure. She's very good at her job. But yeah, there's just so many ways that the content can be repurposed where it doesn't have to just live on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. There's so many things that you can do with it as a business owner that I'm just such a believer in the power of it. So we're saying that when you work with businesses, you find podcasts that fit them. With so many podcasts out there, what is your strategy of finding the right ones for people to be involved with?
By now we have a Rolodex for anybody who's old enough to remember what a Rolodex is. I used to have one on my desk, but we have a Rolodex of podcasts that we have had clients on. So I have a teammate who's another mom from school, and we've worked together now for years. That during the one-on-one, she's like, "Oh, this one would be a good one. This one would be a good one," and then we're constantly researching new ones every day. We listen to every podcast before pitching to it to
Hmm.
make sure, does this align? We look at websites, we read the show description. And these are little things that you can do that don't take a ton of time to make sure that who the host is trying to attract is who you're trying to attract. So we look at all of that. Part of the onboarding is asking, who is your ideal client? Who is it that you are trying to target? Who is it that you want to reach? What is your content for? And so we look at all of those to make sure that they align in one way or another.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's super important because it's easy to say yes to everything. But as a business owner, your time is so valuable that if you're not putting that time and energy in the right places, you're going to spend a lot of time wasting your time on the wrong audiences that are not going to convert into anything meaningful for you.
Yes.
So, unless you just want a great conversation, one of the reasons I started this podcast is I was like craving conversations around businesses and I wanted to speak to people that were experts in areas that I didn't know much about that I could learn from. So there's value in things like that, but if you're specifically going in with the goal of selling your book or your coaching project, you have to be in the right places for that.
Yeah. And also don't always look at the numbers. Oftentimes clients are like, I get this a lot of, if you could get me on Joe Rogan. And I'm like, well, no,
Oh God.
why? Like, first of all, why?
Same. If you can get me on there, it'd be great.
Yeah, I'm like, but second of all, what is it that you're going to bring to the audience that listens to Joe Rogan? Is this your ideal audience? Are those people the ones who need to hear about whatever business, your optometry business? Like,
Right.
do those
Probably
align?
not.
Probably yes. So I'd rather have you get on a show that has 1,000 listeners a month and they all want to hear from you. Every single
Hmm.
person is going to be interested in what you have to say versus
Hmm.
the million plus who don't care.
Right. They're like,
So,
next, next.
yes. Yeah.
They're listening in the background. They're not like intently listening. There is a big difference.
Yes.
Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about you talk about PR, like publicity for podcasts. And back in the day, PR used to mean like getting in magazines and getting in newspapers. Clearly, things are so different now. So, can you talk more about like the publicity piece and where you see all of that going?
Your podcasts are huge for PR. And, a lot of it is because you can repurpose them. So they have a bigger evergreen life than if you do 30 seconds or 3 minutes on a TV clip, where you just get that clickable bait versus you get 30 minutes plus on a podcast. And to see traditional publicists, they're trying to pivot to podcasts, and it's a very different type of PR. Traditional media, you are trying to get their attention right away. Usually it's something breaking, you're going up against breaking news. So when you have newsrooms, they're churning out all kinds of headlines and you're trying to fit yourself in there. You're following up within 24, 48 hours. You want to get their attention. You are really writing emails that are short and to the point. Podcasts are totally different because hosts are generally like you and I. We have full-time jobs. This is a side thing. We are not sitting here begging for our next guest. So do
Right.
not come at us and then 24 hours later follow up and then 24 hours later follow up again. That's
Right.
that's one of the big differences. And you need to give everything that you have in that initial pitch email.
Hmm.
Hyperlink everything, share all of the facts. This is why you want to have me or my client or whoever it is on your show, here's all the information. If the host has to go outside of your email to Google because you did not provide a hyperlink, then you failed. You've completely failed already if they have to do homework other than just clicking because they want to find out more. So
Mhm.
those are the big differences, the follow-up and the type of pitch.
Yeah, and as podcasts get more and more popular, like you said, there's major celebrities going on podcasts to promote their next project. So these pitches, like the more that podcasts become popular, I think the more polished that people need to be in order to secure these spots on different shows, depending on how big the shows are. We're getting lots of pitches throughout the week, and you have to stand out. You need to find a way to make yourself be known and seen and really, really easy to book.
Yes. And that's not to say, if you've never done a podcast interview before, don't pitch yourself. You should, but make sure you have that messaging down. Make sure you know what you're
Mhm.
talking about, because showing up like this is not going to be the make or break. Like, you will figure out if you can have a conversation, you can be interviewed on a podcast. But you should know what it is that you want to say. You should know what your why is behind what you do. How did you start your business? What is your origin story? Like, these are basics that you should have down before you pitch yourself.
I love it. Okay, so we're running out of time, but I do want to jump into, well, first of all, if there's anything else that you think is really important that people need to be aware of or know or understand, like as we're getting bigger into podcasts, from your standpoint, anything important that people should know?
That you should always repurpose as a way to say thank you. Always share your interviews. And oftentimes the pushback I get is, well, my audience already knows like who I am or what I do. They don't. Repeat yourself and share, and remember that it's also an extension of thanking the host when you tag them and when you share those interviews. Because there is time and money and effort that goes into producing a podcast. And as a guest, you just got all of that for free. So it's the bare minimum that you can do to say thank you.
That's awesome. And there's sometimes, as people's audience grow, you forget sometimes like, oh, people weren't here from the beginning, so they don't know
Yes.
my story, or they might not have heard that because that was something we did months ago, and now my audience has grown and these people are all brand new. So I
Yes.
do love when they do, like, whether it's on social media or through an email of like, hey, if you're new here, let me catch you up.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's super important. Okay, so I want to leave listeners with, is there one thing that people can do today to improve their lives or their business? Like, what's that one thing, easy first step that somebody can implement today to get started?
Think about what you've been through and how you can share that with somebody else, because you're then going to help someone else on whatever stage that they're in, whether it is their business or their personal life, as part of your story. What obstacle did you get to overcome to be where you are? What tools do you use in your business that somebody else can also use? And in doing that and sharing it, you're not only helping somebody else, but you are helping yourself. Because I think that if we can change one life with our story on a podcast interview, then like, what more is there to your life? Like, you've done it. Check. You're good to go. You have done something that helps somebody else, and that in turn will help you.
Oh, that was so beautifully said. I love that. And they say like the best person to talk to about something is someone that's already been through it.
Yes.
And it's so true. And there's so many people out there that are willing to help and mentor and share their tips and share their advice. And I do feel like the more that everyone can connect and help each other out, the better that everyone's going to be for it.
Yes. I fully agree.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. If people are interested in going on podcasts and need to work with somebody like you, where's the best place for them to find you?
My website is themlgcollective.com, and you can find me all over social media at Michelle Glogovac. I am there. I am very present.
And I'll share all this in the show notes so it's very easy for people to find you. But I appreciate you sharing all of your expertise and tips. And, it's an interesting conversation. And I can't wait to see where the podcast world goes and how AI fits into it and where it doesn't. And just the time will tell.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thanks for listening to Nothing Small About Business. Make sure you follow this show so you don't miss the value in upcoming episodes. Share this with someone who's growing, and connect on socials for more.